you don't know, she is going to be serving as the new president of the Crete Historical Society. And I'm here to welcome you all, and thank you for coming out, to this program to honor Roy and Florence Schumacher. Before we start, I just wanted to make a couple of announcements for our members. We're going to have our Christmas cards available probably sometime next week. And we're going to be selling them for $6 for 10 cards, a packet of 10 cards. Marianne Gember is going to be in charge of the cards. Where are you, Marianne?
Right here.
There you are. And if you want to see her even tonight to place an order, it's going to be picturing the Gaines family farm. They're very nice, so we're excited about getting those out. So see Marianne if you're interested. Otherwise, she'll be contacting you and at the various locations. We're going to have some at probably the Village Hall and Annie's Cafe. Our holiday party is going to be taking place here on December 11th between 6 and 6:30, because we can't decide which time is right tonight. And items we're going to be showing you tonight. And I want to thank Ivy with the refreshments, and Ivy Bolger, and Cindy Burns for bringing us some refreshments this evening.
And Ruth Stewart from cookies.
Oh, great. Thank you. Thank you, Ruth. And I'd also like to acknowledge a special person. Since I'm the new president, I wanted to acknowledge Phyllis Monk, who's been so important to the Historical Society and our community, and her devotion and dedication always shines through on all the projects she undertakes. I've been looking a lot at the history books and the pictorial history and getting a lot of information for the presentation tonight. And I see you've worked on this since 1980. And just wanted to acknowledge all the work that you've done to put that together. It's really incredible. We're very impressed. So now we can begin the program, and I'd like to introduce Roy and Florence's family. The first daughter is Weenann Buckmeyer. Would you stand? Next is Harriet Gensler and her husband Ed. And Sabra Betty. And we have Ed's going to introduce some other family members.
The oldest Schumacher with both Myers. Thank you, Ed. You sit down.
To start the program tonight, I'm going to read some of the history that the daughters put together, and it's all in chronological order. So feel free to ask some questions or make some comments as we go along. I know a lot of you have seen a lot of these items already and have expressed, like report cards and the operettas and that kind of thing. So feel free to add whatever memories you have you'd like to share. So I'm going to start down on this end, and then after we're through, of course, you can all come up and take a look. Roy Schumacher was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, January 13, 1910, to Herman and Anna nee Steger Schumacher. Roy and his parents moved to Steger when he was a boy. He grew up in the house across from the Steger Piano Factory, which is now the location of the Town Plaza in Kmart. His great-uncle, John V. Steger, founded the Steger Piano Factory, as well as the village of Steger, serving as its first president. We have quite a few items from the Steger history, of course.
And this is a picture of John Valentine Steger, who was my father's great uncle. And then when we were going through some things, we found a postcard that showed the Steger piano when they were just getting ready to open a new, like a display room to show the pianos that they had available. And so we thought that was interesting. And then when we were going through the articles, we found just a little note of the date of when this display was opening, which we thought was interesting. And then in here, I took a picture of this piano, which has been around for a long time. And we never quite knew the significance of it until we talked to one of our relatives, Bud Hartman, that when my father's parents were brought out here to help close the Steger piano factory. And in return, part of his payment was to get this Steger piano. And it's just been around forever, and so it's now at my house. And it's really pretty, but some of the veneer is wearing off a little bit now. But it's very, very heavy. I have moved twice since I've been here in Crete, and I had the same movers. And when I moved to the house that I am now, they said, "Are you planning on moving again?" And I said, "I'm not sure." And they said, "Don't call us if you do." So that was interesting. But it really is a nice piano. But I can't get it tuned up to key because they're afraid that they'll break the sounding block, so it's always an octave lower than what it's supposed to be. But it still plays pretty good. Okay, that was the Steger. Did you talk about my dad when he was little?
He attended grade school in Steger and became active in the Boy Scouts. Later, he attended Bloom High School in Chicago Heights and graduated in 1928. It was during his high school years that he had his first newspaper experience as a staff member for the school paper, The Broadcaster.
Which we have one up here. This was the one from his senior year, and then they ran a picture of the staff. Was this the picture of the staff members at that time? And he was in there. And then we do have the broadcaster up here as well. Yeah. And then the yearbook from the year that he graduated as well. And when he was little, he had these blocks. Now, these are wonderful little things. Unfortunately, my dad really protected these things because I remember seeing them sitting around forever, but I don't recall us being able to play with them very often, do you? No. So that's probably why they're still in pretty good shape.
After high school, he attended Colorado College in Colorado Springs, Colorado. His education was interrupted by his service in the U.S. Army from April of 1942 to November of 1945.
There are just a few things up here. There's just a little pamphlet up here from when he was in Colorado Springs. We couldn't find too much from when he was there.
All right. Florence McCoy Schumacher was born November 5th, 1911 in Chicago Heights to Milton and Winifred Hughes McCoy. She was the fourth generation descendant of the early settlers, John and Sabra McCoy, who settled along the area of Sauk Trail that is now part of the Cook County Forest Preserve. Florence's great-grandfather, John, was a founder of one of the first public schools in the area and was also one of the founders of the Crete Methodist Church. He donated supplies and labor for the original building that was built in 1851. John and Sabra's home was one of the stations for the Underground Railroad. It was not unusual for them to have 5 escaping slaves from Missouri in their cellar, awaiting transportation to the next station.
Can you show the little Bible or the hymnal?
Well,
Get around.
I don't know if you can see this, where their farm was on Sauk Trail as you're approaching Western Avenue. Maybe a mile to the east. Did you say, Sarah?
Yeah,
And these were photographs that were taken back then, how the old Sauk Trail looked. And if you look, you'll have to come up and look really closely, but it's right in there, and that's the Sauk Trail that we know today without the vans are out of it today. But their farm was on the north side, and across on the south side of Sauk Trail is, as I understand, when they sold it to the Forest Preserve, is an Indian burial ground. And the Potawatomi Indians would migrate from Michigan in the fall, and Sabre and John would let them camp on the land, and they would bring Sabre and John cranberries from Michigan in the fall, and then they would winter in Iowa. And as they came back in the spring from Iowa, they would bring maple sugar and syrup. And they called Sabre the good white woman, and she was just really renowned with these Potawatomi Indians. And Sabra, my sister, that's where Sabra gets her name.
She's not the good white one. Don't quote me on that.
Well, I don't know, but I have this giant picture of Sabra, and she looks like the sternest thing in the world. But I suppose she had 12 children, so, you know, that could have had something to do with it. I'm not sure. But this is the family Bible, too, and when you come up here, it's an older one. It's not John and Sabra's. It was some of their 12th childs, Nettie and Ira. And in the back, it has an interesting obituary of Carrie and, well, it was Carrie and Florence, is what their name, but Rosebud and Carrie Mae, they called her. And it's how one died, but then one supposedly saw the angel of one, and then she soon died thereafter. She said, let me get dressed, you know, get me dressed, and I'm going to go with my sister. And it was just kind of novel. I mean, it's just, I don't know, real interesting how they write it up. It's in the back where it says family records. It has some of it. It's interesting.
And what was also interesting about that family, talking about pictures, we have another picture, and it must be like this. And it's these 3 little children. And, you know, they didn't have small pictures in those days. You'd think, why? This one particular family with 3 children that died of diphtheria. I guess that's how they memorialized them. They just had this humongous painting that they just kept for the years. Really too large that any of us could use in our homes today. Guess they had more room there.
How about the hymnal? Wasn't it used?
Now, this was Sarah, one of the 12 children, in 1865. And if you look closely at this, the hymnals in those days didn't have music, because they were just the words. They were all songs of familiar tunes, so they didn't need music. But what was neat, the little story that's been passed down to us was when they would have the slaves, and they would stay, and Sabre was a very religious lady, and she would always get out the Bible or the hymnals, and they would sit around and read, and this little Sarah was seated in the family with these slaves, and I guess they were having their little prayer vigil or whatever, and they were going to sing, and this little black child next to her was holding the book and supposedly going to try to read or sing too, and Sarah reached over and said, oh, but it's turned upside down, you know, you have to read it this way. And the little boy said, well, you know, they didn't read, he couldn't read, he had no idea when he was getting, you know, trying to join in. But that was just kind of a neat little story to think that, you know, they really tried to help these people, you know. And these are pictures of my mom's childhood home. It was in Chicago Heights. There was a little alcove in the fireplace, and over the fireplace and there were wooden benches on either side were these really murals type things, and they were of the old Sauk Trail when Sabre and John lived there. And they're just really landscape pictures. But when we sold the house, we couldn't remove the pictures because they're painted on the walls. So we took the pictures of the pictures. But it was kind of unique. Once again, these are just huge pictures. I don't understand why. They really did things large back then.
No, that's
Kind of a McCoy.
Florence's mother's family, the Hughes, were also early settlers to the Crete area, and Florence is a 5th-generation descendant. Her great-great-grandfather, Lumen Hughes, came to Crete with his family in 1837 and settled on some 2,000 acres south of Crete named Hawesburg. Today it is the site of the Balmoral Park racetrack. In fact, the family homestead was located where the clubhouse is, and the family cemetery was located in the area surrounded by the racetrack. In later years, the family relocated to South Main Street in the village of Crete, where they farmed 140 acres. In 1842, her great-grandfather, Dr. Samuel Hood, and his son built a family home where Harriet and her husband, Ed Gensler, live today. Florence's grandfather, Rollin Austin, raised national black Langshan, a Chinese breed of chickens. He also served as a village trustee and owned and operated the Hughes Implement Shop in downtown Crete. Did you want to show some of those?
This is a picture of what the black Langshans were that he raised. But what? Yeah. Did you want to say anything about the Hughesburg, the cemetery? It's in the middle. There was a little article. Oh, here was a little article about the cemetery that's in the middle of the racetrack.
Some of the bodies were moved and some of them remained, and it's just asphalted over, I guess, now. But a lot of them were moved to the Crete Cemetery. But I don't know why they... Winston DeMuse, and I'm sorry he's not here, he's got a lot of the, trace the genealogy back to Newman, and even before that.
So he has all these wonderful little charts that are far more detailed than what I can remember. If I have any questions about family, I go to Winston.
You know, it's interesting, back in those days, I came across this little note, and this was back in 1881. Now, this was one of the relatives from Lumen that had moved to where we live now today, in our home state, and there's just this little note written that on May 5th in 1881, on our mother and father's wedding day, they drove over snow banks with the horse and buggy. Now, in May 5th, now the weather was a little different then, but can you imagine? It was right here. You know, you think, wow. And this was a picture in 1923. Rollin Austin Hughes had the family reunion. And they all gathered at our, what is our house now, and there had not been a reunion until we had one 3 years ago, in 94, much smaller than this. But it was kind of a fun get together to meet a lot of these people. And one of the honored guests was Jean Houghton, because she also is in this picture. She's just a little girl.
Right there.
Can you show us which one is Jean?
Yeah, it's right here.
She is in the
Do you know how
front
many
row.
people there were at that reunion?
On that list.
On the list, what is it? Let's see.
I know, but it was kind of sad, you know, this, Rollin Austin had planned this, and they sent out formal invitations. I mean, we came for invitations, and they had the food and everything was all planned out. And he promised everyone that there would be another one in the next few years. And after living through this reunion, he died 2 weeks later. Like I said, there was never another one until we had one.
86.
But that would be individual
I would
pictures.
guess
Yeah.
more.
Yeah.
And in the house, on these pictures, you'll notice that basically they're the old, we've tried to keep it basically the same manner with the shutters, with everything. In fact, when I was remodeling, I took out square nails that they used to use. I still kept them, but I obviously didn't use square nails to put things back. But we tried to keep everything basically in the same structure, the same style and architecture that was there. We're hoping to continue to do that. Hoping.
Several of Florence's descendants were also charter members of the Methodist Church in Crete, where her great-great-uncle, Reverend Samuel Hughes, served as a minister. Many of the Hughes descendants' grave sites are located in the Crete Cemetery, including Florence's great-great-grandfather, William, a revolutionary war soldier.
And it's too bad Winston's on here because he would have a lot to know about that.
And he mows it, he takes care of it. So I think he talks to all these people every time he mows it. So he has a lot of love and respect for these family members. He's the one that knows the stories. I can go back a little farther than we can. Interesting, really interesting.
Okay, I'll talk about Florence. She attended grade school in Chicago Heights. At this time, she enjoyed being a member of the Campfire Girls and began to achieve great success as a golfer. She was considered by Golf Illustrated to be one of Chicago's juvenile stars. As a preteen, she appeared on stage at the Chicago Heights Lincoln-Dixie Theater after she had played in a tournament at the Chicago Heights Country Club against her mother and won.
All right, well,
Are you down there yet?
not
Okay.
right there, we're here,
Can you see this picture? Check the hairdo. Can you imagine a little girl with a huge bow?
Then we came across some of her, in her book, that some of the toys that she had left. Noah's Ark ABC book from 1915.
This one wasn't hers. It was, she had a younger brother who died in infancy. And this was a gift, now I can't tell you the relation. It's Jean Hotan's. Grandpa Wardwell. Jean, where are you? Where does he come into the picture? Grandpa Wardwell in relationship to my mother.
Grandpa Bardwell married Francilia Severance Hughes.
And this was in my mother's things, and there was a little note in there that said from Christmas 18,
No, 19.
her mom's mentioned it must have been like 1908. And it was Christmas, and it was from Grandpa Wardwell. And it's, you know, there it's same little original string, just kind of backed away. It just kind of shows the sign of the times then, I think. You know, see, ice works like this today.
Oh, and then the golfing things down here. This, we came across, this is the article, that this was the magazine, the Golf Illustrated, that it had the article about my mom in it. And then there is some memorabilia up here about all the different golf awards. It's a shame that none of us took up golf. My older sister did a little bit, but you know, maybe one of us would have had a little bit of talent, but we didn't do it. And this was the club championship at Lincolnshire, and they changed the trophy in what year? In 1951. Well, they must have changed it in 53, but. And so then they went to a different trophy, and because my mother had won the championship so many times at Lincolnshire, they thought she should have it. So, kind of hard to store, though. Anything else there?
You just write a funny little, really little crib that my mother used to say she played her best golf when she was pregnant because she won the year she was expecting me and she won the year she was expecting Sabra. So, maybe an influence, I don't know.
After she graduated from Roosevelt Grade School, she attended Boone High School where she met her future husband, Roy. Both worked on the school newspaper, The Broadcaster. Florence was the editor and Roy was a member of the newspaper's staff. In 1929, Florence graduated from Boone and continued her education at a girls' school in Mississippi, Gulf Park College. From there, she attended the University of Illinois in Champaign and received her bachelor's degree in education in 1932. Then she returned to Crete and began teaching at the Crete Community High School. She taught English, directed the Glee Club, and also directed a number of school operettas, which we see Virginia Hotan, from 1932 to 1942.
And some of you people out here beware. We've got the dirt. Those grades are in here. You know, when you teach now, you can't keep your grade books, but I guess back then they could keep them every year. And it's interesting. You know, I came across Aggie Herbig, you know. There were a lot of names. Marian's in here. There were Kenny Muring. I mean, there were just Florence Kirkhorn, Jimmy Adams. There were a lot of names in here. You might be interested to try to remember what grade you got.
At the Methodist Church, she started the youth choir as well. During the summer, she returned to the U of I to complete the credit hours needed to receive her master's degree in English. Also in the summer, she continued to enjoy her golf game. At this time, Roy was completing his basic training in the U.S. Army, earning the rank of Staff Sergeant. He came home in October to marry Florence on October 31, 1942 at the Crete Methodist Church. During their 42 years of marriage, Roy liked to jest about their Halloween wedding, and how their lives together were a real trick-or-treat experience.
Just go on and just
After their honeymoon, Florence returned to Crete to complete her teaching contract and then joined Roy at the military bases in Florida and later in Oklahoma. Florence came home in the spring of 1944, and Roy joined her in July when her first child, Winifred Ann, was born July 28th. Soon after that, Roy was shipped overseas to begin his tour with the 9th Infantry in Germany, France, and England. He was finally discharged in November 1945, several months after World War II ended. The baby that he left with Florence during the war was now a 15-month-old toddler.
This is what we have here. When we went through, he had a skier, and this is just a soup plate, but it has the Nazi Sydney on the back. Apparently he just brought that home with this army gear. We still have his uniform at home, and I think like Judy said, he was at Fort Sill. My mother came home a couple months before when Ann was born, and then she got the baby here, and I was telling Judy, and then Dad came home that week after when Ann was born, and was shipped out, maybe the following week, to Germany, and then like Judy said, did not return. And I just, I just keep thinking, can you imagine being a new mother and not even knowing, it's one thing, your husband being gone, your husband in a war. What that turmoil must have been for all these moms at that point in time, gee, that was a rough time. But Mom kept a diary, and she didn't get, too many letters, but she'd comment in the diary what Dad had said, and then we have a letter that she had written as if when Ann were writing it to my father, explaining what she had been doing, how she was, and then she included all these little pictures, and on the back of these snapshots are just little sayings of what when she was sticking her tongue out now, or she was throwing her hand up when she walked, and just kind of things interesting that it just makes you really think when a young mother it must have been really difficult during those years, And then we have a lot of the newspapers that.
And on the flip side, I have a letter that my dad from overseas wrote back to an Ann.
And the war ration coupon book, and just things that are hard for me to visualize. Because I've never, Vietnam War is the closest experience that I could say we come to it in. We really didn't have a direct involvement there.
And then he sent back these dolls to an Ann when he was overseas. One was from England and one was from France.
I don't think I got them till I was a lot older.
About 30?
Yeah.
soon went to work for Reuben H. Donnelly Publishing House during the day and attended Kent Law School in the evenings. For a time, Florence remained home as a homemaker, caregiver for her mother-in-law, and a part-time golfer. In October of 1946, the AMVET Auxiliary Post 84 was organized. Florence became a charter life member and the auxiliary's first president. Through the years, she held this position on several occasions. At the same time, Roy became a charter life member of the AMVETs and served as the post commander for one term in 1974 to 75, and then remained a service officer for a number of years.
And so then we just kind of tried to display some of the things that we had from when they had the auxiliary. So we had a picture, we found a picture of my mom when she was the president. That must have been around Memorial Day, huh? Memorial Day. And then a dad, my father was commander at the same time. And just some little memorabilia from the auxiliary. She loved the auxiliary.
In 1947, their second daughter, Harriet Louise, was born on March 5th. Did you hear the applause? This was also the year Florence won many of her golf championships at the Lincolnshire Country Club in Crete. In 1948, Roy purchased the Crete record with Kenneth Weeks and became one of the 5 family members affiliated with the Crete papers through the years. In 1950, he became the sole owner of the paper and published it from the old Wilkening building at the corner of Main and Exchange Streets. Soon after that, Roy began publishing the Stager News, a paper similar in format to the Crete record, but headlining the Stager interests. Then in 1949, their third daughter, Sabra, was born December 14th. Even though she wasn't the little boy they had hoped for, she was named after her great-great-grandmother, Sabra McCoy, and helped carry on the family heritage. Now the newspaper became a family business. Florence attended meetings, wrote copy, and proofread linotype, while Roy hand-set type for story headlines and operated the linotype machine and printing press. Each daughter had her turn in getting up before daybreak to fold and label the papers for mail.
We brought some copies that we could find of the Crete record when my dad was publishing it. We couldn't find an actual, we don't have an actual one from the Stager News. We have a copy of the Stager News, but not when it's a later one, not when my dad was publishing it. Couldn't find any.
And we came across a letter that he wrote to the Russell Publishing Company when he actually turned it over to them. Apparently, they sold it, but that he kept associating with it maybe for a year or so. Then we found just a Xerox copy, a carbon copy really, of his letter, which when he finally relinquished it. And we have some old pictures of the presses. And now, if you look closely at these pictures compared to the laser prints that they have today, and to think that you could even publish anything with this kind of equipment. And I think Sabra, when he had an eyeball, a test of folding them. I mean, we would have to get up at 4:30 in the morning to fold those newspapers and get them, well, first we'd have to help catch. You'd stand at the front of this press, and it had like these little finger type things that would release the paper, but because the paper would catch occasionally, and then you'd have a backup and everything, the papers would be ruined and they'd get twisted and turned. We'd have to stand there and catch each paper as this little finger thing released it. And you'd stand there and stand there and stand there, and then the next one, you'd stop every now and then, take the group of them off, put them on where we'd fold them, and then fold them. Of course, we'd always trying to see who could fold the most. But it's the faster you folded, the faster you got out of there. So, you know, a little incentive there. But, I mean, it truly was a family business. It was all, you know, as soon as one paper went out, you started copying and so forth for the next, and it was just totally ongoing. But they both really enjoyed it. His mom liked attending the meetings and finding out what was going on in the village, and so she could write the copy without any difficulty, and then Dad would do the mechanical part. So it worked out really best all the way around. But if you come up here, I wish you could look closely at this linotype. because, and we found one, and Ed has cleaned up and has mounted it, and this one I can read. You have to get it in a certain light. I can't imagine proofreading this. They would make tear sheets and print it, and then Mom would read it, but if there was an error in it, you'd have to go to the actual linotype and read it to find where that error is, and to pull it out, and then reset it and get it in there. So you had to have a working knowledge of reading this kind of stuff. And I don't know, but, you know, they were older when they did this, and I'm older now, and it's kind of hard for me to read, you know.
In bright sunlight, you can read it pretty well, but that's about it.
They would make, I think, and I'm not really sure what it's called, these would be like advertisements, and they would be, help me out here,
I'm the youngest, I can't
Sam.
remember this as well.
They make a mold of this, isn't that right, honey Ann? But it was all in hot metal, and then it would be inked, and that would be fit into pages, so this roller for the printing, press could roll over it, and he'd have to paste it up. You can look on the back, he's got little pieces of colored paper pasted in there, so it would have the right printing. One part wouldn't be recessed more than another part. And it really wasn't art, something that I don't think was really very easy, I look at today and think how fantastic they can do with the computers and the lasers, and, you can do things 10 times faster than what you could write a page today, back then.
In 1963, Roy sold the paper to Russell Publications, and Audrey Jr. became its editor for the next 10 years. Through the years, Florence maintained her interest in teaching at all levels. She resumed her teaching career when Harriet started kindergarten. She held both full and part-time positions at Bloom Junior College, which today is Prairie State College, Bloom High School, and Arbor Trail Junior High in Oak Forest. She enjoyed tutoring in her home as well as substituting in many of the local schools. It was the late Charles Gaines who encouraged Roy to become interested in local politics. As a result, he and Roy ran on the Republican ticket to represent Will County in District 1. In 1976, Roy was elected to the Will County Board, where he remained active until 1985. During those years, he ran on tickets with Charles Gaines and Pete Watson, Phyllis Monks and Connor Shaw, and Robert Regan and Elmer Ziegler. Upon his death in 1985, Mary Ann Gerhardt was named to fill the vacancy Roy left. One of Roy's proudest accomplishments during his political career was being a member of the Land Acquisition Committee of the Will County Forest Preserve District. It was during his term in office that the land for Goodnight Road was purchased and developed. During those years, Roy also served as chairman of the Crete Township Plan Commission from its inception by the Crete Township Board. He was a precinct committeeman, a member of the Crete Area Chamber of Commerce, and a member of the Crete Lions Club, where he avidly supported their recycling program from the beginning.
We got through that paragraph.
I think you'll have to stop and look at the political information. Now here, this is Phyllis. And my father was so impressed with her.
Zoom in on that.
She was so interested in politics back then, and as you can see, she hasn't slowed down since, but she just kept going and going, and she was a good candidate to have on the ticket if they won that year. But he was proud to be part of it. Well, he was really, the 3 different times he ran, he was very proud to work with all of these people. Elmer Ziegler and of course Charles Gaines and Connor Shaw.
During the time of Roy's political involvement, Florence was an active member of the Adam Betts Auxiliary, the Will County Republican Women, the Crete Methodist Church, the Crete Women's Club, and the Crete Historical Society, where she was one of the first 6 honorees at their friendship tea in 1992. In 1967, she was elected to and served on the Crete Morning School Board until 1970. Occasionally through the years, she still enjoyed the game of golf. Up until her death in 1990, too, Florence was an individual who loved her community and was willing to lend her assistance whenever she was able. She always said that her roots ran deep within this area and was very proud of her heritage, as well as her school and community involvement. Roy also supported and loved this area. As his good friend, the late Representative George M. O'Brien said in a letter to Florence at the time of his death, Roy leaves a remarkably vibrant and luminous record as a public servant and a newsman. He always approached problems from the point of view of how do we get this thing solved, rather than wringing his hands in despair. Both Roy and Florence loved their family and supported their community throughout their lives in Crete. If they were alive today, aside from their 3 daughters and sons-in-law, they would enjoy 5 grandchildren and 8 great-grandchildren. Incredible.
I just want to say I really enjoyed being on the county board with your father. He really took me under his wing. I was a young thing back then, and we always rode over to the county board together and the Forest Preserve Board because we served on both of those 2 commissions together. And it was very fun. It was almost an hour over each way, so we really got into very extensive discussions about the Crete record, about Crete, about many of you. And we had a very good time. We went out to lunch a couple times, and I said, "Oh dear, let's not hold up anyone." He said, "Oh, I've got time. Let's go out for lunch." And he was just a joy to be with, and he did have, I think, served very well on the county board representing us in eastern Will County. And I know some others might have some other things to say, but I really want to say thank you for your family, to put this fabulous thing together tonight. It's absolutely great. So thank you, both of you, Ed, Winann. It's great. It's wonderful to see all this. I really appreciate it. So.
Anybody else have anything to add?
I enjoyed a very strict teacher. I enjoyed
You
serving.
had to behave in school, you couldn't talk and cut up on
Oh, that there isn't anyone in this room that was in her class that wouldn't say she was our favorite teacher.
We all got a part in the operetta, you don't have to come sing.
I enjoyed being a precinct committee man with your father.
I want to say I've told many people that Florence was my one very favorite teacher all through, and she was sponsor of our class. And remember, she would take us home, and Mrs. McCoy would set a beautiful table of china and crystal and all, and it was so wonderful for all of us to come and sit there and eat like, I'm sure, none of us had ever been exposed to the things that we were at the McCoy house. It was wonderful. And she was our Glee Club teacher. I remember Christmas morning getting up early and singing around the Christmas tree uptown and going to all different older people's homes. And I said, gee, I don't ever have the Glee Club come to my home now, and I'm older. But I have very fond memories of your mother.
Thank you. I think it was very appropriate in our newsletter. We had an anonymous quote, and it said that immortality is defined not by the things you represent, but the lives you touch. And I think it's really a tribute to your parents and the treasures that you shared with us tonight. It's incredible. Everything's so organized, and the history, and so much to be proud of.
She keeps me organized.
Just separate and sharing. So thank you very much, and please come forward. take a look. I'm sure there's a lot of items you'd like to look at, up close and personal. Thanks for coming, everyone. Enjoy.